Well, joining me now is the Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastie, himself a West Aussie. Andrew Hastie, thanks for joining us. Do you support...
Good to be with you, Andrew.
Do you support this announcement in its entirety, or are there any reservations on your part?
The opposition supports this announcement. From a bipartisan perspective, it's historic, and of course we initiated it 18 months ago. So we're glad that the Albanese government has taken the action to acquire 8 nuclear submarines. That doesn't mean we don't have questions, and that doesn't mean we won't act as an opposition and hold this government to account. But this is a historic day for Australia, and we are committed to seeing AUKUS delivered over the 30-year span that the program will take.
What are we trying to achieve as a nation here by obtaining nuclear submarines?
It's very simple, Andrew. In 2020, Prime Minister then, Scott Morrison, stood up at the Australian Defence Force Academy and presented the Defence Strategic Update, which said that our region is deteriorating and the rise of China and authoritarian powers are making things more dangerous and disorderly across the globe, but particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. And Australia had to respond. There was a calculation made that the Collins-class submarine and the Attack-class submarine that was being provided by the French wasn't going to be fit for purpose, and Prime Minister Morrison set out to acquire nuclear submarines from the United States. And that's what was done. That's why this is so historic. We're the only there's only 2 countries in the world the US has released this technology to, the UK and now Australia, so it's very, very significant. But we are responding to the strategic circumstances we find ourselves in the Indo-Pacific region.
Was this similar to the deal the coalition government would have come to if re-elected, do you think?
That's a great question, Andrew, and I can't speculate because I haven't followed the logic of a highly compartmented organisation, which is the Naval Submarine Task Force. So they've come to their conclusions. We do have questions. We have questions around the timing. We have questions about the sequencing, particularly with the potential operation of 3 submarine classes in the Royal Australian Navy. And then, of course, we have questions around how this will be paid for, given it's estimated to cost between $268 and $368 billion. That's a huge amount of money. Now, we support this process and you know, the cost of inaction will be much higher, but we do need to have a conversation about how we fund this. And we do so that doesn't jeopardise other important programs that the Australian people enjoy.
When the coalition government was looking to do the deal on this, was a nuclear waste dump in Australia always a possibility back then?
I think it always had to be a possibility, but again, Andrew, I wasn't part of the detailed briefings. But we will support the Labor government as they seek a solution for the disposal of nuclear waste. It's an important part of being a steward of this capability. And we have a very stable continent. We've got a vast amount of land, a good amount of it unused. And so we'll support the government as they go about disposing of future waste. And, you know, we're a mature nation. We sell uranium. We're about to become stewards of nuclear technology, and we must be able to dispose of it as well.
And Richard Marles was saying before that the first sub will be around 10 years old. It will have 20 years of shelf life left coming from the US. What do you think of us getting second-hand subs first?
Look, in the end, Andrew, we've got to respond to the strategic circumstances before us. The rise of China and its somewhat belligerent behaviour in the region has brought on AUKUS. That's just the reality. You know, people don't like to say it down in Canberra and elsewhere, but that is the reality, and that's what we're responding to. And that's why we're going to be hosting on forward rotations 4 US and 1 UK sub in Perth from 2027. And so that's the hedge to sort of cover the gap between today and when we get our first Virginia-class submarine in 2033. But we've got assurances that that submarine will be fit for purpose, it'll have been through a full maintenance cycle, and I'm confident that it will meet our needs.
Okay, there's been a bit of talk today about interoperability of the US, UK and Australian fleet. And of course you've got China with a number of nuclear submarines. The big difference that sticks out here is Australia doesn't have nuclear warheads. Does that matter?
No, I think the real game changer with the Virginia-class submarines and the SSN AUKUS joint submarine that will be built by Australia and the UK is that they'll have a vertical launch capability, which means you can fire up to 12 missiles and indeed 16 Tomahawk missiles in one salvo. So when we're talking about, to use the language of the Deputy Prime Minister, impactful projection, to have Australian submarines deployed forward, which can then fire up to 16 missiles from the vertical launch capability, that is a game changer, absolutely. So nuclear weapons, that's a side issue. We're not pursuing nuclear weapons, but we are pursuing cutting edge technology that will give us the edge if we're ever in a situation where we need to punch our way out.
Could you see these subs being used in a China-Taiwan conflict?
Look, that's again a hypothetical question for a government of the day, but certainly we are becoming more integrated with the United Kingdom and the United States. But I also want to add as well that our strategy under the former coalition government, and it's a strategy that's being continued under the Albanese government, is to be a good regional neighbour. We want to ensure that the prosperity and security that all nations have enjoyed over the last 80 years in the Indo-Pacific region continues. And that means, sure, we're entering into this special relationship with the US and the UK, but we're also going to be working very hard maintaining our friendships and our partnerships with lots of countries around the region, from Papua in the Pacific to Singapore to Vietnam to Indonesia. All these countries are really important to our future in the Indo-Pacific region.
No guarantee from the government here for an East Coast subspace. What's your reaction to that, notwithstanding you're probably happy with the investment in your home state?
Look, I'm very happy with the investment in WA. It's great for people in Mandurah, where I live. It's great for people in Rockingham and the sort of outer metro area. I think you grew up there, Andrew, or you're familiar with it anyway. It's great there. It's a great part of the world, as you know. But certainly the East Coast submarine base is the missing piece of the puzzle. And I think it is important that we identify where that will be, because these things have a long lead time. And so it's important that we get certainty for not just defence, but also the private sector and industry who will be involved in building this base. And that leads me to a question that I have, and what happens to the dry dock, large vessel dry dock in Perth that was committed to by the Morrison government last year, $4.3 billion. Again, no certainty around that. So the Defence Strategic Review, which will be announced next month, we'll be watching very closely indeed.
All right, my in-laws live in your part of the world. I'll just clarify that, Andrew Hastie. But Richard Marles seemed to indicate the Collins class might not extend to the end of its life. What's your reaction to that? He didn't say that. He hinted that could be the case.
Again, this is why we want. This is why we have questions around the sequencing of this project. What's the role of the Collins class? Particularly as we see the Virginia class come on, and then the first SSN AUKUS delivered in 2042. Will the life of type extension continue? What will happen to that workforce if it's not continued? And how will they progress this? These are questions that the government needs to be transparent about and give certainty to South Australian industry.